Hi, this is Joel Curtis, meteorologist with your Alaska Weather TV show. Starting out with our hazardous weather, it looks like the West Coast is really going to get some weather coming in tomorrow and starting in the early morning hours all the way through Thursday. We have a wind chill warning right now from Wainwright to Point Hope. We also have a blizzard warning for Wales and St. Lawrence Island, winter storm for the Yukon Delta, wind chill advisory for the Chukchi coast. That should be ending pretty quick here. Winter storm watch all around Norton Sound, and that's probably going to go to warning. And a wind chill. Also, we have a winter storm warning for the Chukchi Sea area. So looking at our satellite loop, a front is forming along that low that's in the Gulf of Alaska, and also you can see extensive clouds moving into the western and now central Bering Sea with a very, very strong frontal system that's going to be moving across and affecting the west coast. So starting out with today's weather, we've got the frontal system out in the far west. The warm front is already through the central Aleutians. Heavy snow out ahead of this system. Snow showers and rain in the warm sector to the south of a 965 millibar low in northeastern Russia, and then heavy snow showers behind the cold front. In the meantime, as we look east, for the Gulf of Alaska, we have a 981 millibar low. A front has formed around this low, and some of that has moved onshore into the Panhandle. Snow showers behind the system, mixed rain and snow showers in the low center, and some light snow in southeast Alaska. Also, we have some flurries in the eastern central region of the state and also along the north slope. For tonight's weather, we have the frontal system has now really advanced into the central Bering Sea, 961 millibar low near the Gulf of Anadyr. And that cold air will be catching up with that warm air that forms what we call an occluded front. Heavy snow out in front of it, also blowing snow over the ice at this time. We do have lots of snow showers behind the cold front. And then that low is really weakening in the Gulf of Alaska with snow showers all across the Gulf. Some very light snow in the eastern central region of the state and also along the north slope. For Thursday's weather, you can see that the front now has all caught up and has moved onto the west coast, blowing snow and snow out ahead of this system, and snow showers all in behind the system. 984 millibar low still near the Gulf of Anadyr. The low in the Gulf has weakened to 977 millibars and has slipped south to near Haida Gwaii, but there's still some snow showers in the southern Panhandle and a little bit of snow showers out over the Gulf. For Friday's weather, all the systems have weakened, including the one that's in northeastern Russia, 983 millibars. It's linked up to a low off the Kenai Peninsula at 988 millibars by a trough, and also in the eastern section of the Gulf, 984 millibars. That low is still weakening with some snow showers around that low, rain on the south side and rain out ahead of a warm front. And then we see a stationary front marking some cooler air to the north and still fairly cold air over the Aleutians. Lots of snow showers with that system, including some fairly significant snow showers that will be up toward Kotzebue. So our low temperatures Thursday morning, starting out from southeast Alaska, 20s and lower 30s, down to 24 for Yakutat, -6 for Golconda, 14 for Valdez, 13 for Seward, 14 for Homer, -1 for Kenai, 6 for Anchorage, and 0 for Talkeetna, up to 22 for Kodiak Island. And then all along the north slope for our low temperatures, -30s and -20s until you get to Point Hope, -16. -25 for Kotzebue, -8 for Nome, -6 for St. Lawrence Island, -18 for the Yukon Delta. Also, -21 in the Yukon Flats, -19 for Fairbanks, and then warms up as you get a little further south. -20, though, still near the Alaska Range for Delta Junction, and -22 for McGrath. Then our low temperatures Thursday morning as we go out southwest, looking for -9 for King Salmon, -6 for Dillingham, -15 for Bethel. And then as we get further south, 16s, teens along the Alaska Peninsula out to 29 for Dutch Harbor, minus 19 for the Pribilos, and around 30 for Adak and 25 for out at Shemya. Then for our high temperatures Thursday afternoon, the temperatures in the 30s and even up to 40 for Southeast Alaska, 38 for Yakutat, 12 for Golconda, 30 for Valdez. And then as we come around, we're looking at 22 for Talkeetna, 19 for Anchorage, 19 for Kenai, and up to 30 for Homer, 34 for Kodiak Island. Then for our high temperatures Thursday afternoon, minus teens along the North Slope, but get all the way to plus 3 when we get out to Point Hope, 1 for Kotzebue, 11 for Nome as a surge of warm air coming up with that frontal system, 12 for St. Lawrence Island. Looking further east, minus 4 for Fort Yukon, plus 7 for Fairbanks, 14 as you get down to the Alaska Range, and plus 5 as we get down to McGrath. For the southwest on high temperatures Thursday afternoon, temperatures in the 30s and lower 40s as you go out the Alaska Peninsula to Dutch Harbor, 36 for the Pribilos, 38 for Adak, 35 for Shemya, and then looking at 14 for Dillingham, 21 for King Salmon, 16 for Bethel. And then our low temperatures Friday morning in the southeast, 26 for Skagway, 31 for Juneau, 37 for Ketchikan, 36 for Sitka, 22 for Yakutat, 0 for Golconda, 18 for Valdez. And then as we get up to Talkeetna, plus 12, 14 for Anchorage, 14 for Kenai, 26 for Homer, and up to 27 for Kodiak. Then along the North Slope for our low temperatures Friday morning, still in the minus 20s the further east you go, minus 25 for Dead Horse, but then you get minus 2 as you get out to Point Hope, minus 6 for Kotzebue, 0 for Nome, and 3 for St. Lawrence Island. Also, we get minus 8 for Fairbanks, also minus 18 for the Yukon Flats, minus 21 for the Eastern Brooks Range, and minus 3 for our friends out in McGrath, minus 15 for Northway. Then as we go out for the southwest Friday morning, you can see 8 for King Salmon, 5 for Dillingham, plus 7 for Bethel, but in the 20s and lower 30s as you go out the Alaska Peninsula, 29 for Dutch Harbor, 29 for Adak, 31 for Shemya, and 24 for the Pribilos. Our high temperatures Friday afternoon, we're looking at the temperatures in the 30s and lower 40s for the Panhandle, coming around to 18 for Golconda, 32 for Valdez, 27 for Talkeetna, 28 for Anchorage, 27 for Kenai, 33 for Homer, and 34 for Kodiak Island. Single digits, but below 0 for the North Slope, and 7 as you get out to Point Hope, 7 for Kotzebue, plus 14 for Nome, and 11 for St. Lawrence Island, plus 17 for Fairbanks, and 16 for McGrath. And then for the southwest, temperatures in the 30s, 20s as you get into the Bristol Bay Area, 20s for southwest Alaska, 33 for the Pribilos, and 37.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
And now for aviation weather. Starting out with our flying weather Thursday morning, we have an area of IFR off the Panhandle coast, and that's associated with the low pressure system that's rapidly dissipating and moving to the southeast. We also have some IFR conditions over northern Glacier Bay, northern Lynn Canal area, and then IFR from St. Matthew Island down across the Pribilos, down into the eastern Aleutians, including Unalaska Island, some marginal VFR along the North Slope, over to the Alaska Peninsula, and through Kennedy Entrance. For Thursday afternoon, we have IFR has made its way with a vigorous front into southwest Alaska, including the Kuskokwim Delta and the Yukon Delta, as well as the southern part of the Seward Peninsula. Also some IFR offshore in the Gulf of Alaska, and marginal VFR conditions along the west coast and in the western Aleutians. For Friday morning, that IFR has moved inland with the front into the western Alaska, all the way down to Shelikof Strait and all the way up to Kotzebue, some along the Chukchi Sea coast along the North Slope. And then we've got some IFR moving into the western Aleutians, as well as northern Lynn Canal, northern Glacier Bay. For Friday afternoon, IFR again along the west coast with a second band associated with the front. Also into south central, lower Cook Inlet and parts of the Kenai Peninsula, as well as on up into the Brooks Range. Also some IFR conditions for northern Glacier Bay and again northern Lynn Canal area. For our pass conditions on Thursday, AKwx Pass VFR, Adigan Pass VFR, Lake Clark and Merrill, both VFR, Rainy Pass VFR, Windy Pass VFR, Isabel Pass VFR, Mentasta Pass VFR, Tanita Pass VFR, Portage Pass VFR, Chilkoot Pass and White Pass starting out as IFR and becoming VFR in the afternoon. For our freezing levels, again, most of the state as at the surface. However, you can see a big slug of warm air out ahead of the front, moving up into the central Bering Sea, including about a 4,000 foot freezing level over the Pribilos, and all the way up to 8,000 feet over Nikolsky. Also a little bit of warm air south of Dixon Entrance. For our icing conditions on Thursday, we have a rather large area along the west coast associated with that front, between 3,000 feet and 8,000 feet, considerable moderate, and a couple of bands moving across the Aleutians, surface to 10,000 feet, associated with the freezing level and then a lot of warm air aloft. Also between 2,000 feet and 10,000 feet off Haida Gwaii, but the rest of the isolated moderate area below 3,000 feet. For a jet stream on Thursday, we have southwesterlies over the west coast of Alaska all the way up to 115 knots, 125 knots south of Unalaska Island out of the west. Also, the northerlies have kicked in now over eastern Prince William Sound up to 105 knots, and then we have southwesterlies up to 70 knots over the Panhandle. For a 9,000 foot winds on Thursday, all associated with a very strong low pressure system that's northwest of the Gulf of Anadyr, 85 knot westerlies into the western Bering Sea, up to 55 knots over the western Aleutians, around 45 knots or so as you get further east and it starts to become southwest. Along the west coast, we have the wind ramping up with that front, 55 all the way up to 70 knots as you get up to the Chukchi Sea, 30 knots over northern Brooks Range. Also, we have 30 knots over the Alaska Range, and some 70 knot winds up to 50 knots moving into southeast Alaska. For our 3,000 foot winds, again, circulation around that low off of Haida Gwaii, up to 70 knots through Dixon Entrance, tapering off well into the 40s as you get into southern southeast. Along the west coast, up to 65 knots as you get into the Chukchi Sea, around 55 knots over the Kuskokwim Delta, and then drops off to 40 all the way down to 30 knots as you get further inland. Over the western Aleutians, up to 70 knot westerlies. And then for our turbulence on Thursday, quite an area of isolated severe below 6,000 feet for the western Aleutians, also below 4,000 feet as along the west coast, considerable moderate, and then below 6,000 feet in areas of southeast Alaska and the Gulf Coast. And then one area over the Alaska Peninsula below 6,000 feet. Fly safe out there.
Technology. It's the rhythm of our everyday life. We're more dependent on satellite and communication systems than at any other time in history. Disruptions can affect our economy and even our safety. To prepare for the effects of such events and minimize impacts, we need to look outside our atmosphere, some 93 million miles away, at a star we call the Sun. It's our main energy source. It warms the Earth and grows our food. While the Sun and the space between may seem pleasant from our perspective, it's anything but peaceful. At its surface exists a chaotic state of eruptions and radiation. And unlike Vegas, what happens at the Sun doesn't stay at the Sun.
Space weather is essentially emissions from the Sun radiation, magnetic field that erupts from the solar surface, pumped out into space, sometimes right towards Earth. When it impacts the Earth, it impacts our technology. That's what we call space weather.
These solar events and their effects at Earth can disrupt systems we take for granted. From causing blackouts to the power grid, to delaying offshore drilling operations due to inaccurate GPS data. Interference with communication systems can force air traffic to reroute and impact rescue response and coordination. Outside our atmosphere, solar radiation can harm astronauts and the systems they depend on. The good news is that these eruptions can be detected early. Forecasters at the NOAA Space Weather Prediction Center in Boulder, Colorado, have their eyes on the sun at all times.
The Space Weather Prediction Center is part of the National Weather Service and is very much like a normal weather forecast office. We're here 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We're looking at data, we're looking at imagery, we're looking at model outputs. As conditions develop, we put out alerts, warnings, and watches of imminent activity to our customers so they can take action.
In many ways, forecasting space weather is a lot like forecasting hurricanes. Those who rely on space weather forecasts, like electric power grid managers, are informed early on and can begin taking protective action.
When we see an eruption on the sun, space weather forecasters will issue a watch. This is much like a hurricane watch. When a hurricane sits offshore of Miami, for example, perhaps 48 hours out, we too can see way in advance that something may be coming towards the Earth.
As the storm moves toward us, it hits a monitoring spacecraft orbiting 1 million miles away from Earth.
It's kind of our buoy sitting out there offshore, and that hurricane about 30, 45 minutes before it makes landfall, we'll get the measurements from the buoy. That's what this spacecraft does for us. That big eruption that left the sun hits the spacecraft. Now we've got the measurements of exactly what's going to impact us here on Earth, and we issue the warnings to give the power grid a heads up that the storm is now imminent. An interesting element to this whole process is that when the forecasters issue the alert, power grid receives the alert, takes the necessary actions to protect the grid, and the average citizen never knows anything ever happened.
The number of customers who rely on space weather information continues to grow. As our reliance on technology increases, so will our need for constant monitoring of the sun.
Space weather affects technologies. As conditions develop, we put out alerts, warnings, and watches to our customers so they can take action.
GPS has changed society. Most people don't realize how remarkable and how many different applications there are.
The GPS has become an integral part, not just of our daily lives as far as cell phones and guidance for our cars and mapping, but the whole system in agriculture is really relying heavily on high accuracy GPS.
So they're using GPS to plant those seeds with centimeter accuracy. And then they can come behind it and irrigate and fertilize right where that seed is with that 1 centimeter accuracy.
The GPS creates a line for the operator that he can steer along, or you go to another level and the operator doesn't steer anymore and the tractor has an automatic steering system on it, much like a cruise control on a car. except for when I push the button, it doesn't drive a set speed. When I push a button, it stays on a predefined line.
You don't even need lights. You can do it at nighttime. You program your GPS and it's driving that tractor for you. So it's huge, and it's changing the way that the farmers farm the fields.
6 or 7 days out.
There's an interest in GPS applications from space weather side because when the sun is eruptive, it causes GPS to falter, and in some cases it doesn't work at all.
Productivity may suffer to a certain degree in that there's no way that I, as a human being, can steer as good 8 hours a day as a GPS system's going to do. It's going to be the same all day long. Some of the other application technologies, those are going to be gone. We're not going to have the ability to do good section control on sprayers and planters and fertilizer applicators without GPS.
We see a huge growing customer base in so many different industries, so many different sectors now relying on GPS and high precision GPS. They're all big customers for us.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
And now for our marine forecast. Starting out with the ice edge, we're in that period of time and in the pattern for a retreat to the northward, plus north-facing shores could see some upwelling and shore-fast ice breaking out and moving toward the north. For Thursday's marine forecast, southeast on the inside waters, 10 to 15 knots, seas up to 6 feet down by Clarence Strait, up to 3 feet on the rest of the inside waters. And then on the outside, easterlies generally up to 20 and some 25 knots, seas up to 14 feet. For Friday's marine forecast, on the inside waters, 10 to 15 knots, seas up to 4 feet. And then on the outside, generally southerlies, 25 all the way down to 10 knots off of Cape Spencer, and seas up to 16 feet. Circulating around the low for South Central, we have 20 to 25 knots on the outside waters, northerlies 15 knots, seas 3 feet for Prince William Sound, and then northeasterlies in Cook Inlet up to 20 knots, seas 4 feet south of Kenai, and then as you get down to the Kennedy entrance, northwesterlies 25 knots, seas 7 feet. Then for Friday, we have some southeasterlies, 20 all the way up to 35 knots as you get down toward Kennedy entrance, easterlies 20 knots, seas 3 feet for Prince William Sound, northerlies 10 to 20 knots for Cook Inlet, but northwesterlies 35 knots in the vicinity of Augustine, seas 9 feet. For the peninsula and Kodiak Island on Thursday, on the outside waters, up to gale force 35 knots, seas 11 feet south of Sandpoint, Chillicothe Strait, southerlies 20 knots, seas 3 feet. For Bristol Bay, southeasterly 30, seas 5 feet, and then off of Coal Bay, westerlies 40, seas up to 15 feet. Then for the peninsula and Kodiak Island on Friday, westerlies up to 45 knots on the Pacific side, seas up to 19 feet, and on the Bering side, up to 45 knots, seas 27 feet. For the Aleutian Chain, storm force in the west, westerlies 50 knots, seas 31 feet, and then backing off to gales as you get further east, all the way down to 35 knots south of Alaska, seas up to 19 feet on the Pacific side, and up to 26 feet on the Pacific side. And then for Friday in the Aleutian Chain, southwesterlies generally, as you look 40 to 45 knots, and seas all the way up to 30 feet. And then on the Pacific side, 40 to 45 knots, seas up to 23 feet. For the West Coast, starting out on Thursday, we have westerlies the further south you get, up to 45 knots. But then as you get close to shore with the front, it's 40 to storm force 50 knots out of the south and southeast. and then 30-knot easterlies for Norton Sound. And then for Friday, generally southwesterlies, up to 45 knots in the Pribilof, seas 30 feet there, 26 feet near south of St. Matthew Island, and then backing off to southeasterlies 20 knots in Norton Sound. For the Arctic coast, easterlies 20 to 30 knots along the north slope, and then as you get down toward the Bering Strait, 35 to 45 knots out of the east or southeast. For Fridays on the Arctic coast, 20 to 25 knot easterlies along the north slope, and then southeasterlies 35 knots as you get down toward Kotzebue Sound, and then southwesterlies behind the front, 20 knots in the Bering Strait. So recapping tonight's weather, strong frontal system moving into the Bering Sea and beginning to affect the coast for lots of warnings along the west coast. And then for Thursday's weather, that frontal system catches up, moves onto the coast, lots of snow, blowing snow, warnings there on Thursday, snow showers in the Bering Sea, and an old low spinning up south of Haida Gwaii, and it's 977 millibars, and some snow showers circulating around the front in that low. Then for Friday's weather, all of the systems weaken, 983 millibars for northeast Russia, connected to a trough down by a low near Kodiak Island, 988 millibars, and then another low spinning off of Cape Omni, 984 millibars, with a real weak high over the Alcan, 1,006 millibars, and a stationary front all along the Aleutians, dividing very cold air.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.